Okay, to get started with today's lesson on the legislative branch of government, let's start with this. What was the Great Compromise and what did it do? Take a few seconds to think about it. And here's what it was. If you look back at the Constitutional Convention, there were a few major issues that were the focus and some compromises that needed to be made. One of them dealt with how should the power in the government be divided in terms of large and small states. If you remember correctly, the problem was this, and these are totally fake numbers, so don't use the numbers. It's just really designed to make a point here. And it really connects more to modern times than it does to the past, whenever they would have actually had this issue come about. But let's pretend that we use the system that the Articles of Confederation used, which was each state gets one vote. If that's the case, what do you say about the fact that California, let's say, may have 37 times more people living there than Rhode Island? Should they still only have one vote each? Well, small states said yes. Each state should only get one vote. It's all about the state, not about the number of people in the state. However, people from California's side said, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense because if we have 37 times more people, we should have 37 times more votes because our people here in California, with the current system of one vote per state, literally have 1/37th the say in government that the people in Rhode Island do, and that's not fair. So this becomes a big argument. And some support this idea of equal numbers of representatives per state, and some support the fact that maybe larger states should get more representatives based upon their population. The problem is that we can't get everybody to agree on one of these systems, so what ends up happening is a compromise is made. Now, the New Jersey plan was really this idea of equal representation per state. There's one House, and members in Congress would be equal per state with one representative per state. This is something that the small states really liked. Virginia, on the other hand, and representatives from Virginia, proposed a plan that would have called for two houses, with both of them having representation determined by how many people you have in your state. In other words, the number of representatives from your state is based upon your population. So maybe one representative for every 100,000 people, let's say. So then if you have 1,000,000 people living in your states, you get 10 representatives and 10 votes on laws and on other things in the country. They would argue that this is fair by population, and this ends up being favored by larger states. The Great Compromise used a little bit of each. It created two separate houses, with one being determined in the number of people each state gets, determined by population, which really comes from the Virginia plan, and the other one, there's my wonderful circle, sorry about that, being favored by smaller states, which was the equal per state. If we want to know what these are actually called, this is going to be called the U.S. House of Representatives, put little dots there, and the equal per state is going to be called the U.S. Senate, and we're going to look at both of those now today. Our target. I can identify the members, roles, and powers of the legislative branch. So basically, who's in it, and what can they do, and what should they do. Random target of the day, we have our nice little laser pointer, and those are mirrors that actually look like really good frying pans. Yeah, don't criticize me. Out in the way. Don't worry, my head is still attached. I'm alive, but my neck is getting sore apparently. Okay, legislative branch making the nation stronger one law at a time. The key question that we've been bringing up throughout this entire unit is, does this protect us from tyranny? Continue to think about it because that is a really, 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 really important idea. So, what people are in the legislative branch? Well, we have the Congress, and who is the Congress? It's a lot of people that come from two separate houses. And the key thing that I want to focus on here is this idea of houses. We're not literally talking about a house like a door and windows and stuff like that. We're talking about a group of people who vote. Group of people who vote. That's what we're talking about with the House. The first one is known as the House of Representatives, and the second one is known as the Senate. Now we're going to look at both in depth, and when we actually put them all here together in one location, they fill up a pretty big room. There are 535 members. This picture is from the State of the Union, which features more than just the Congress, but some other people as well. So, the House of Representatives. There are 435 members of the House at any time. That is a set number. It was set a few years back with the idea being that originally it was for every so many people you had, you got another member of the House of Representatives. The only problem is that some people in the government recognize that if we continued on that path, we'd end up having thousands of people in the government, and that wasn't really appropriate. So, we've set the number at a maximum 435 members at any given time. And how many you get in your state out of that 435 is determined by your population. Everybody gets at least one, so even if you had a really, really, really small population, you would get one. However, the more people you have living in your state, the more representatives that you can have voting on behalf of your state. These people in the members or in the House of Representatives, excuse me, are elected to 2-year terms in office, and there are 3 requirements. You have to be 25 years or older, a U.S. citizen for 7 years, and you must live in the state you are to be elected from. There are also 5 non-voting members, including the District of Columbia, which is Washington, D.C., Guam, American Samoa, U.S. Virgin Islands, and I believe I left off Puerto Rico from this list. But those are the 5 non-voting members. In other words, they get to send people and delegates to basically talk on their behalf. However, they don't get to vote whenever it comes time to vote for issues. This is the apportionment of members of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2000. This actually was changed in 2010, so the numbers aren't totally accurate, but you get the idea here. And the key thing I want you to look at is California over here. Look at that. They got 53. That means that they have the most populated state in the country. And then second behind them we have Texas and then New York. But think about this. Aside from Texas, California basically dwarfs everybody on this side of the Mississippi River, which is really a crazy thing. Maybe not everybody, but it's pretty close to it. So they actually have a lot of power. So like you have Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, who don't have the power anywhere near what California has, and they really can overwhelm them. This is the House of Representatives. This is also going to impact the Electoral College, which will be discussed a little bit later on. I just want to kind of make the connection here. So the more people you have in your state, and that's going to affect the Electoral College. And these are the districts that we have within Pennsylvania, showing us where we get our voting from, and we are currently, part of, there we go, 18 right here. A little bit of an odd range there, but Tim Murphy is our current U.S. representative here. The Senate. Each state sends 2 representatives to the Senate. They serve 6-year terms and are elected by the people. Originally, they were elected by the state legislature. That's a little technicality. Don't really worry about it too much. 3 requirements to be a senator, United States senator, that is. You have to be 30 or older, a citizen in this country for 9 years, and you also have to be a resident of the state that you want to be elected in. There are 100 senators at any given time. Pat Toomey and Bob Casey are the 2 current senators representing Pennsylvania. Now, what can they do? From laws to impeachment, all that good stuff. The biggest power and really the most important function of the legislative branch is passing laws. Laws are meant to benefit the people, and they're meant to guarantee liberty and really to protect people and their property. It's a very complex process, though, and it takes a long time. You guys like the exaggeration there, don't lie. Did I say it takes a long time? I think so. Okay. Anyways, so how can a bill actually become a law? Let's talk about all the steps, and let's also talk about how the House of Representatives plays into this as well as the Senate, because they kind of each play a similar yet different role. Somebody thinks up a law. However, in order for it to actually go to Congress and be discussed, it has to be sponsored by somebody who is in the United States Senate or the United States House of Representatives or the President. What they can do then is they can take the bill and then take it to Congress. Now, given that this is Representative Murphy, who is a member of the House of Representatives, it would be given something right here. This is called House Resolution, and I just added the number 777. It could be a Senate resolution too, though. And let's say this one is dealing with civil rights. What he'll do is he'll bring it forth, he'll present it, then it'll be sent to a specific committee. So let's say this is civil rights. You're going to have committees that are on all different types of topics here. So some are going to be related to trade laws, some are going to be related to safety laws, some are going to be related to transportation. This one will be related to civil rights. It will go to a specific committee where they would discuss it, make a few changes and amendments to it, and then they would bring it back, and they would then let people vote on it first in the House of Representatives. If the House of Representatives passes it, then it goes to the Senate, and it must also be passed there. Key idea alert, key idea alert, key idea alert. Raise your hand, jump up and down, make sure you're alive here. Here's what you need to remember. It must pass in both houses with a majority of the votes, majority meaning more than half. If it does not, it is not going to move on to the next step. Is that clear? So if it doesn't, it can go back to be revised again, and changes can potentially be made, or it can just be shut down if we don't think that it's going to be passed. Once it is passed in both houses, it then goes to the president, and the president has the option now to sign it into effect, or instead to veto it. If the president vetoes it, it'll actually go back to the houses, and to the Congress, excuse me. And in order for it to overpower the president, they have to get a 2/3 majority vote in each house, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. It's not very easy to do that. So the reality is that if it's only barely passing in those houses, the president could shut it down with a veto, and then it's going to have to pass by a lot more, and it might not. However, if it's a really, really good idea, but the president doesn't like it, it still will go into effect, and that's an important thing to understand here about the system. Some interesting facts here. One bill has been over 1,000 pages long, involving 200 members of Congress and 17 subcommittees. Interstate trade is what it really deals with. Very complex, and it does take very long. And the reality is that more than 90% of all bills are defeated in some manner. Being tabled means that basically they go to the committees, and the committees look at them and say, I don't know if we can really do this right now. It has some things we need to work out, and it just doesn't really pass because of that. Sometimes they make it all the way to the voting, and the subcommittees say that they like it, but it doesn't pass voting. It doesn't get the majority in both houses. And then sometimes it gets vetoed by the president and does not make it through because of the president, even though it passed with an initial majority in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Another extremely important power of the legislative branch is the power and the authority to appropriate money. This basically means that Congress gets to decide who receives federal funding based upon using our tax money. So basically appropriating is setting aside money for a special purpose. This can be for all kinds of things. The military, highways, school lunches. Truth is the president signs off on this too, though, just so you know. So he does have a very important say in this as well. Some other powers, they can impeach other members in the government. Impeachment is often misunderstood. I mean, I feel like almost everybody who I've taught this to, it seems like they need to be retaught it, because people think that when you're impeached, that means you're removed from office, and it doesn't. That means you're bringing formal charges against somebody. So that just means you're going to be put on trial. So a president could be impeached, a Supreme Court justice could be impeached, other members of the government could be impeached. Again, it just means to bring charges against you. From there, you go on trial in this. And the Congress and the legislative branch is going to determine whether or not you're guilty and you're going to be removed from office. They also are considered to be the watchdog of the executive branch, so they supervise them, making sure they don't do anything that's going against their power and their authority there, especially the president. And they also are supposed to help their own states. I mean, keep in mind, they're voted into position by people living in their own states. Like Tim Murphy, for instance, is voted in by people in Pennsylvania, and therefore he has to do what the people around here want, or else they're not going to vote for him. Again, that's an important thing. Remember, if you don't like somebody, people always talk about impeachment. Oh, you got to impeach him, you got to impeach him. No, you just don't vote them in the next time, and you make sure other people don't vote them in if they're really doing things that aren't good. Now, there is federalism within the legislative branch, and that's an important thing to understand. So we have the United States Congress that's on the federal level, and they pass federal laws. So yeah, Tim Murphy and Pat Toomey and others, they're on this federal level of this, and Bob Casey's the other one, excuse me, they're slipping my mind there. But for the federal United States Senate, United States House of Representatives from Pennsylvania. However, this also functions on a different level. In state, we have state congresses with state House of Representatives and state senates as well. And then local governments also have the ability to do a lot of things like this, like passing laws that are called ordinances. For instance, if you go to the Upper St. Clair Township website, you can find the specific ordinances or laws that are unique to Upper St. Clair. It's twpusc.org if you actually want to go and check it out. Now, an example of some laws, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you can see JFK there on the right. He helped to pass this, and you're thinking, wait a minute, he died in 63. Well, he was helping to work on this quite a bit before it finally got pushed through in 64. But this outlawed racial segregation in schools, public places, and employment. That's a federal issue. That's why it was a federal law. The U.S. PATRIOT Act of 2001, which is the United in Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism Act. But nonetheless, the USA Patriot Act is designed to allow the government a little bit more ability to search through records and other things to really protect us from terrorism. So that's another federal act. Keep that in mind. In Pennsylvania, a few years back, there was a smoking ban that was put on all public places, including hospitals, schools, and sports facilities, even in restaurants. That's one thing that's really funny, a big change that occurred for me. When I was younger, I remember walking into just about any restaurant, they would say smoking or non, and that option really isn't available in very many places at all that I know of. So interesting to think about that. That's a state law. Again, does not affect all states, but in Pennsylvania it is in effect, and others as well. Then we have driver's license requirements, and they vary so much between states, it's crazy. So like for example, in PA, you have to be 16 to get your permit first. Then you have to drive for 6 months and get 50 hours of driving practice if you're under 18 years old. Then you get a restricted license, it's 16 years and 6 months at the youngest age, and a full license at 17. If you look at South Dakota, and this is going back a few years, so I could be a little bit off on some of these numbers, but this is accurate as of a few years back. They can get their license or their permit, excuse me, at 14 years of age, have the permit for 3 months, and then get a restricted license at 14 years and 3 months, and then a full license by the time they're 16. So look at how different that actually plays out. It's an interesting thing to think about. Now, what I want you to do here is break a mental sweat. Yeah, there we go. That's a weird looking 80s person, I guess. But and think about the laws on the back of your note guide. You do not have to put the part that relates to the preamble to the Constitution. Lesson got a little bit changed around in terms of order, so don't worry about that right now. However, that's what we need to work on here. So you have that, and you have a quiz. All right, good luck.